Hello and welcome to another video. In this one we're taking a look at the exotic gem versus the Infinite PhysiX. In addition to the exotic, I also drilled a new Infinite righty, so I'll be able to compare the two balls on both sides of the lane, and we'll be on the house pattern for the righty comparison and on the sport pattern for a comparison on both sides. Starting off with the exotic on the right side on the house pattern at 3000 grit. Remember from the review that I did knock the polish off the exotic. The Infinite comes at 4,000, not 4K fast, but I also took it to 3,000 for an equal comparison. The exotic is pretty strong and blendy. What it really reminds me of is something like an Omega Crux, not quite that early and slow, but same kind of direction, or like a super strong No Rules Pearl. Very strong, very rolly, kind of heavy rolling, but not exactly tumbly like a Nova. Sorry if I'm losing you in the bowling terms, but if you don't get it, the exotic is like a longer and sharper Omega or an Arrow stronger No Rules Pearl. Now to relate it to something more recent, if you have no idea what either of those balls are, or if you've seen my comparison to the Altered Reality, it's like an earlier and smoother Altered Reality. Moving to the Infinite, I really like this ball period on both sides of the lane. It's definitely cleaner up front, so I don't have to worry so much about keeping my speed up. It's also a little sharper down lane, so I can just relax a bit more with it, I guess. The exotic isn't the monster the gem is, but it's still pretty heavy and early rolling, and if I let up too much, it's going to get moving. The Infinite reminds me a lot of the original Rubicon. It's clean and defined, but rounder shaping and really controllable. With it, I can focus more on rolling the ball. I can catch it at the bottom, and with just getting back to this side and learning to plant, it's just a bit more comfortable for me than the exotic on the house pattern. I really like the big strong stuff like the exotic though, so on heavier patterns where the Infinite is going to be too long and too weak, the exotic's going to come in really useful. Definitely no overlap here. I think the difference shows through rather well on video actually. The Infinite would be like a half a ball down or maybe even sideways as far as shape goes depending on the situation. On the house pattern they both do just fine. The Infinite is just longer and sharper, but they both handle all areas of the lane well, so very nice shape complements on the house pattern. Moving on to the sport pattern and staying on the right side, the relationship is mostly the same, but with the extra volume, the blendier nature of the exotic helps it manage the lane a little better. It was fairly early and smooth on the house pattern, but more oil means it gets down the lane easier, saves more energy, and punches a bit harder on the back end, so for me on the right, especially with surface, I prefer it on the sport pattern over the house pattern. Same general reaction, it's just suited better for this tougher condition. Still a little stronger overall than I'd need on this particular condition. I don't usually need this much help with hook or traction, plenty of capable of creating that on my own, but if this pattern was an extra couple feet longer, we'd definitely be in business. Looking at the Infinite now, it's more comfortable for me from straighter, but once I start moving in, I get more comfortable throwing it, but since it's more responsive, it's a little more sensitive. It's interesting to watch because both these balls look good, but the Infinite gives me just a little less room left to right. It's a bit too quick if I get it in, and a bit too long if I miss out. Now, more surface would blend it better, but I'd rather just leave them as they are. That way I can use the exotic on the fresh and step down to the Infinite on transition. One thing that drives me nuts is when people buy a bunch of balls because diverse arsenal, but then they try to drill them all and adjust the surfaces to make them all the same. They'll take the early and smooth ball and drill that to go longer and be sharper, then the longer and sharper ball, they'll drill that to be earlier and smoother. It's okay for balls to have a specific purpose and just let them be what they are, even if that means you don't use them a whole lot. If you're at 7-iron distance on the golf course, you don't 3/4 swing a 5-iron, you just hit the 7-iron. The exotic is great at doing what it does, and the Infinite is great at doing what it does, so I'm just going to let the exotic own the sport patterns and the Infinite own the house patterns and transition on sport patterns. Switching sides, we'll start with the exotic. We are on the sport pattern for the lefty comparison. Also remember from the review that this was pretty good. Gave me a lot of room, I carried everything, but it's longer and sharper on the left than it is on the right. I'll have a video on this coming soon detailing the differences in the right and the left, but short version is less traffic on the left means less wear on the lanes, less friction in the track so the ball doesn't get as much traction as early, so reaction on the left is generally longer and sharper than on the right. This sounds great, but also it means less margin for error. It feels more cliffed, etc. So having ball reaction like this with a ball like this is somewhat rare. You can see I've actually got some misroom and forgiveness, and on this pattern no less. Over to the Infinite. With the Infinite being cleaner and more responsive, it's a similar relationship to how it was on the right. the ball reaction looks really sexy, and with as round and controllable as the Infinite is, it can definitely hang out. It just wouldn't be my first choice on this pattern. Again, it's a little too responsive. I really like this one on both sides though. Like I said, being asymmetric keeps me from using it as much as I'd like to lefty. I'm usually in something like an Idle Cosmos and now the Fate, but it's on the short list and I know I'll be using it quite a bit on the right. I think you can see that there's no fear of any real overlap between these two. The Exotic is marginally stronger, but also a fair amount earlier and smoother, so definite complements rather than competition. The Exotic Gem releases on December 9th. Pre-order link is in the description below. It's an easy way to help the channel. Also remember to check out my memberships for early and exclusive videos. Thank you to my outstanding members. Thank you for watching, and may the strikes be with you.